हेलो स्टूडेंट्स, हम लोग पढ़ रहे थे चैप्टर नंबर 3 ह्यूमन रिप्रोडक्शन, जिसमें हमने लास्ट क्लास में समझा था गैमेटोजेनेसिस। गैमेटोजेनेसिस में हम लोग पढ़ चुके हैं स्पर्मेटोजेनेसिस एंड oogenesis। आज हम पढ़ेंगे मेंस्ट्रुअल साइकिल।
There are three phases in the life of a living organism: juvenile, reproductive, and senescence. During the reproductive phase, organisms give birth to offspring. Interestingly, most organisms display certain morphological and physiological changes during the reproductive phase. Human females, for instance, experience the menstrual cycle, which is defined as cyclical changes in the genital system during the reproductive phase. Incidentally, a woman experiences her first menstrual cycle, called the menarche, at the onset of puberty, usually between the ages of 9 and 12. Occurring approximately every 28 days, a single menstrual cycle consists of 4 phases: menstrual phase, follicular or proliferative phase, ovulatory phase, and lastly, the luteal or secretory phase. Each phase of the menstrual cycle is marked by simultaneous changes in the uterus, ovary, and the secretion of hormones. For instance, during the menstrual phase, the endometrial lining of the uterus and its blood vessels break down and mix with blood, mucus, and other cell debris to form menses. The menses are discharged through the vagina as menstruation or menstrual flow, which lasts for 3 to 5 days from the beginning of the menstrual cycle. Interestingly, the absence of menstruation indicates pregnancy or ovarian disorders such as polycystic ovarian disorder, or even factors such as stress and ill health. The menstrual phase is followed by the follicular phase, which occurs between days 6 and 14 of the menstrual cycle. During this phase, the primary follicle in the ovary matures into a Graafian follicle. Simultaneously, the endometrium undergoes proliferation, a process of regeneration which results in the formation of a new, thick endometrium. The follicular phase is followed by the ovulatory phase, which occurs during the middle of each menstrual cycle. During this phase, the Graafian follicle ruptures to release an ovum or egg cell into the pelvic cavity in a process called ovulation. The ovulatory phase is succeeded by the luteal or secretory phase, the last phase of the menstrual cycle, which occurs between days 16 and 28 of the menstrual cycle. This phase sees the transformation of the remaining Graafian follicle into a yellow mass called the Corpus Luteum. The endometrium too thickens, and its blood vessels become coiled and enlarged. Interestingly, the endometrium and corpus luteum play a vital role during the early stages of conception. For instance, a fertilized egg gets embedded in the endometrium and derives nourishment from it. The corpus luteum, on the other hand, starts secreting progesterone that helps maintain the endometrium and encourages the growth of the developing embryo. Conversely, in the absence of fertilization, the corpus luteum degenerates and triggers the breakdown of the endometrium. This marks the start of menstruation and the beginning of a new menstrual cycle. Did you know that the phases of the menstrual cycle are controlled by the interplay of different hormones secreted by the ovary and the pituitary gland. At the onset of menses, the anterior pituitary gland increases the secretion of the two gonadotropic hormones, luteinizing hormone or LH and follicle stimulating hormone or FSH, that simulate the development of primary follicles. However, the amount of estrogen and progesterone released by the ovary during this time is less, which causes the thinning of the endometrium. The release of LH and FSH keeps increasing, and during the follicular stage, these two hormones stimulate the maturation of the primary follicle into the Graafian follicle. Moreover, LH and FSH stimulate the maturing follicles to release estrogen, a hormone that helps in the proliferation of the endometrium. The increased levels of estrogen, in turn, cause the anterior pituitary gland to release a surge of LH and FSH, so much so that by the ovulation stage, the levels of FSH and LH in the blood are at their peak. This LH surge causes ovulation by rupturing the Graafian follicle and turning the follicle's remnants into the Corpus Luteum. The estrogen level in the body too reaches its peak, and we see a gradual thickening of the endometrium. However, once the corpus luteum begins secreting large amounts of progesterone, an FSH and LH inhibiting hormone, the levels of both these hormones drop, which in turn also lowers the levels of estrogen in the body. However, the endometrium continues to thicken because of an increase in the level of progesterone. Incidentally, the corpus luteum will keep secreting progesterone if a fertilized egg gets embedded in the endometrium. However, in the absence of a fertilized egg, the corpus luteum stops releasing progesterone and degenerates. A drop in the level of progesterone, in turn, triggers menstruation as well as the restart of the release of LH and FSH by the pituitary gland. Menstrual cycles normally stop once a woman reaches her 50s. This phase is called menopause. The menstrual cycle is an important process in a woman's body, and it consists of 4 phases which are controlled by hormones released by the ovary and the pituitary gland.
Menstrual cycle के बाद में अब हम समझते हैं structure of ovum.
Structure of an ovum. Ovum is the mature female gamete which develops from the primitive germ cells embedded in the cortex of the ovaries. Each of the primitive germ cells gives rise to a number of small cells called oogonia through repeated divisions and growth. Oogonia develop into primary oocytes and then into mature ova. Did you know that the ova or eggs of animals can give rise to a complete new individual within a very short period of time of days or weeks? Doesn't this make the ovum a truly remarkable cell in animals? Come, let's learn more about the structure of this remarkable cell. Structure of an ovum. The ova of humans are spherical, about 0.2 millimeters in diameter. They are found enclosed in the follicles of the ovary. Usually, a single ovum is present in a follicle. The structure of an ovum is not very different from other cells, but characteristic names are given to its different parts. For example, the cytoplasm of the ovum is known as the yolk or ooplasm. Cytoplasm. The nucleus is called the germinal vesicle, and the nucleolus is known as the germinal spot. The thick, transparent envelope covering the ovum is called zona striata or zona pellucida, and the several layers of cells derived from the follicle adhering to the outer surface are called corona radiator. Let's learn more about the different parts of ovum. Yolk or ooplasm. The cytoplasm of an ovum can be differentiated into an outer transparent exoplasm, also called the egg cortex, and an inner opaque endoplasm called ooplasm. The yolk or the ooplasm is composed of the formative yolk and the nutritive yolk. The cytoplasm of the ordinary animal cell is the formative yolk. The nutritive yolk contains numerous rounded granules of fatty and proteinaceous substances embedded in the cytoplasm. The human ovum has very little of this nutritive yolk, which nourishes the embryo very early in its development. So, the human ovum is described as microlecithal, because microlecithal is a term used to describe small eggs with very little yolk. Germinal vesicle. The nucleus is called the germinal vesicle. The germinal vesicle is large and spherical and initially occupies a central position. But as the ovum grows, it becomes eccentric in position. So, the human egg has polarity. The part of the ovum with the nucleus and the polar body is called the animal pole, and the other part is called the vegetal pole. The structure of the nucleus of the ovum is the same as that of an ordinary cell and is enclosed in a nuclear envelope. Within the nucleus is a well-defined nucleolus known as the germinal spot. Coverings of the ovum. A thick covering called the zona striata or zona pellucida covers the ovum for some time after fertilization. This layer may serve as protection during the early stages of segmentation. The corona radiator is composed of 2 or 3 layers of cells derived from the follicles. These cells adhere to the outer surface of the zona pellucida when the ovum is released from the follicle. The cells of the corona radiator are arranged radially around the zona pellucida, and the innermost cells of this layer are columnar in shape.
आज हमने चैप्टर नंबर 3 ह्यूमन रिप्रोडक्शन में समझा मेंस्ट्रुअल साइकिल एंड स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ ओवम. नेक्स्ट क्लास में हम इसी चैप्टर को कंटिन्यू करेंगे. थैंक यू.